I caught my wife red-handed with a stranger when I came home early with my kids, and the living room turned into a battlefield. She scrambled half-dressed across the carpet, stammering half-words she couldn't finish, while the man she chose over her family bolted through the back door with his pants half on. I didn't shout. I didn't hit. I just stared at her as she begged under her breath, clutching a blanket like it could cover up what she'd already torn apart. It started small, the way real betrayals always do. The first thing I noticed was how she started locking the bedroom door when she showered. No explanation. No conversation. Just one day the door was closed, locked tight, and her voice floated out when I knocked, all casual like nothing had changed. Be out in a minute. After 7 years of leaving it open, now she needed privacy. Urgently. Then it was her phone, a device that used to lie around the house like a forgotten toy. Now it never left her hand. In the middle of dinner, she'd tuck it under her thigh when it buzzed. At bedtime, she'd turn it face down on the nightstand like she couldn't bear for me to see a single notification light up. I didn't say anything at first. You don't want to believe the foundation is cracking under you. You tell yourself, she's stressed. She's busy. She's got friends venting about their own drama. Anything but the truth gnawing in the corner of your mind. Then came the late-night grocery runs. At first, she asked me if I needed anything. Then she stopped asking, stopped telling. The garage door would rumble open after 10 p.m., and she'd be gone for an hour, sometimes longer, always coming back with 2 plastic bags holding maybe a bottle of wine and a loaf of bread. Like that justified everything. The next shift was her scent. New perfume, something heavy and sweet that clung to her clothes and hair like a second skin. It wasn't her usual fresh, clean scent. It was louder, bolder, the kind of perfume that announces itself before a woman even walks into a room. One night, the kids and I were eating popcorn on the couch when she breezed in wearing it, cheeks flushed, laughing too hard at some joke she didn't share. I asked where she'd been. She said Target. I asked why she smelled like she walked through a nightclub. She said I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to. The following weekend, she suggested I take the kids to a trampoline park while she stayed home to catch up on cleaning. I was halfway to the car before I realized she hadn't packed the kids' water bottles, something she never forgot. She was distracted, nervous, but she smiled so big it almost convinced me. Almost. At the trampoline park, the kids bounced and screamed, and I sat on the bleachers, staring at my phone, fighting the urge to call her just to hear her voice. When I did call, it rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Texted her. No response. When we finally walked back through the front door 3 hours later, she was curled up on the couch, hair damp from a recent shower. Netflix paused mid-episode. The house smelled like candles. But underneath it, faint, almost hidden, there was another smell. Sweat. Deodorant. A whiff of something raw. Something male. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. She stretched and yawned when we came in, made a big show of asking about our afternoon, hugging the kids tight, laughing at their stories. But when she hugged me, she stiffened for just a fraction of a second. Just long enough for my gut to twist into a knot I couldn't untangle. Monday night, she asked me if I'd mind picking up an extra shift at work. I could use a night to myself, she said, flashing me a sheepish smile. Bubble bath, trashy TV, the whole thing. I'll be here when you get back. I wanted to say no. Wanted to stay home and sit with her, find the girl I used to know under all the strange new habits. Instead, I smiled and agreed, because what else could I do? When I came home at midnight, the lights were off. The house silent. I slipped into bed beside her, careful not to wake her, breathing in the faint traces of that new perfume still lingering in the air. The next morning, she was chipper, energetic, making pancakes and singing along to old songs on the kitchen radio. She kissed me goodbye so sweetly it almost covered the taste of lies. Almost. The next weekend, the final pieces started sliding into place. She spent an hour getting ready for a brunch with the girls, curling her hair, putting on makeup she hadn't worn in months, spritzing herself with that suffocating perfume. She wore jeans tight enough to cut circulation and a blouse I'd never seen before. I offered to drive her, joking about being her chauffeur for the day. She froze. No, she said too fast. We're meeting across town. I'll be gone all afternoon. You guys have a boys' day. She ruffled the kids' hair, kissed me lightly on the forehead, and disappeared. The boys and I played catch in the yard. Built a pillow fort. Watched cartoons until they nodded off on the couch. She didn't text once. Didn't ask how they were. Didn't check if we needed anything. When she finally walked through the door just before sunset, Her blouse was wrinkled, her lipstick faded, and there was a bruise blooming low on her collarbone, just peeking out from under her shirt. She saw me looking. She yanked the collar up, laughing nervously, muttering something about bumping into a table at the restaurant. I nodded, said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Only the slow, creeping certainty filling my bones like concrete. I watched her flutter around the kitchen, pouring wine, pretending nothing was wrong, laughing too loudly at the boys' jokes. And all I could think was, she's slipping away. Not slowly, not by accident, deliberately. And there was nothing, not love, not loyalty, not history, that could stop her now. The next morning felt colder somehow, even though the sun was shining. She sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling her phone under the table, pretending to listen to the kids talk about their weekend plans. Every few seconds, her lips twitched into a little private smile she didn't bother sharing with the rest of us. When I asked her what was so funny, she glanced up like she forgot I was there. "Oh, just a dumb meme," she said, setting the phone down screen side down again. I let it go. The day moved sluggishly after that. She found reasons to be out of the room, out of the house. Errands, she claimed. Pharmacy. Post office. Groceries. Always with the same bright, brittle energy, like she was forcing it out of herself with every breath. I stayed home with the boys, playing board games none of us could focus on. By evening, she still wasn't back. I texted her once. No response. I texted again, keeping it casual. "Need anything for dinner?" 30 minutes later, she replied, "Already grabbed takeout. Be home soon." When she walked through the door, hands full of paper bags, the air shifted again. She was too cheerful, too talkative, dumping bags onto the counter, telling a story about a crazy woman at the deli, laughing so loudly even the kids paused to look at her. But her eyes kept sliding away from mine. She didn't kiss me when she passed by. Just a light brush of her hand against my shoulder, a ghost of the affection we used to share. That night after we put the kids to bed, she curled up next to me on the couch for the first time in weeks. She nestled under my arm, resting her head on my chest, like she could feel me slipping away and was trying to pull me back without addressing the growing chasm between us. For a few minutes, I almost believed we were okay. Then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She stiffened immediately. "I'll get it," I said, reaching for it. She lunged faster than I thought possible, scooping it up and tucking it against her chest, laughing nervously. "Probably junk." "Who's texting this late?" I asked, smiling like it didn't matter. She shrugged, too fast, and turned her attention back to the TV. I didn't push. Not yet. I could feel it, though, the truth, squirming just out of sight, waiting. The next few days spiraled tighter. She made plans for girls' night out on Wednesday, something she hadn't done in nearly a year. When I suggested we get a babysitter and have a night out ourselves instead, she laughed awkwardly. "You need a break from me too sometimes," she said, almost like it was a joke. I told myself she was probably right. Still, when she left at night, dressed up more than usual, makeup heavier, heels clicking on the driveway, something inside me twisted. The kids fell asleep early, worn out from soccer practice. I sat in the living room with the TV on mute, staring at the front door. Hours passed. When she came back, it was almost 2 a.m. Her lipstick was smudged, her hair messy, like she had been running her hands through it. She whispered an apology about losing track of time, kicked off her shoes at the door, and tiptoed upstairs without a second glance at me. I sat there until the sun rose. The next morning, she made pancakes. She danced around the kitchen, singing off-key to the radio, like she was the woman I married all over again. It was worse than her coldness somehow, this forced, frantic happiness. At lunch, I caught her checking her phone under the table again, thumb flying across the screen in frantic little bursts. A tiny secret smile tugging at her mouth. I didn't ask, not because I didn't want to know, because I already knew. But without proof, without catching her slipping, all I could do was sit there and choke on it. 2 nights later, she told me she needed some me time. "I'm going to drive out to the lake for a while," she said, tying her hair up casually, grabbing a hoodie off the coat rack. "Clear my head, you know?" I said. "Want company?" She froze. No, it's fine. Just need some air. I'll be back before midnight." She kissed me on the forehead, a mother kissing a child, and slipped out into the night. I stood at the window, watching the taillights disappear down the road. Something was unraveling inside me. I could feel it snapping thread by thread. The kids had a movie on in the den. I sat with them, but my mind was far away. I waited until almost 11 p.m. before texting her. No response. At midnight, she called. Said she fell asleep in the car, staring at the water. Said she was on her way home now. I told her okay. Hung up. Stared at the wall for a long time after. When she finally came through the door, cheeks pink from the night air, hoodie zipped up to her throat, she looked almost normal. Almost. She slipped into bed next to me and whispered, "I love you," into the darkness. I didn't say it back. I couldn't. The next morning, she woke up before me. Made coffee. Packed the kids' lunches. Kissed my cheek as she handed me a travel mug on my way out the door. She was trying to act normal. Trying to convince me, maybe even herself, that everything was fine. But it wasn't. I could see it in the way she flinched when I touched her. The way her eyes darted away when I asked what her plans were. The way she smiled too wide, laughed too loud, hugged too tight. Guilt was seeping out of her pores now. I just wasn't sure if she even realized it yet. Give me a moment. I will now write part 3 properly. Heavy, massive, real 6,500+ characters without spaces. Starting now. I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV, pretending to read the news on my phone, pretending my life wasn't unraveling fiber by fiber. The boys played upstairs, their laughter echoing down the hall, but it barely touched me. Every sound in the house felt too loud, too sharp, and when she walked through the front door carrying a shopping bag and humming a tune I didn't recognize, I could barely lift my head to greet her. She kissed the top of my head in passing, casual, distracted, already peeling off her jacket as she breezed past into the kitchen. I heard the crinkle of plastic bags, the scrape of a chair pulled back from the table. I stayed where I was, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. After a while, I forced myself to follow her. She was unpacking groceries she hadn't mentioned buying. Not junk food or snacks for the boys, a bottle of expensive wine we never drank, candles, imported cheese, things that screamed romance and preparation. Things that had nothing to do with the life we actually lived. I stood there in the doorway watching her, and for the first time, I felt something colder than suspicion. I felt certainty. "What's all this for?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She jumped like I'd startled her, turning too quickly, the bag slipping from her hands and thudding onto the counter. She laughed, that high, brutal sound I was coming to hate. "Just felt like treating us," she said brightly. "We deserve it." Us. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it, pretending to be the fool she thought I still was. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, we sat on the couch with a glass of that overpriced wine between us. She curled her legs under her, tapping aimlessly at her phone, barely pretending to watch the movie I'd put on. Halfway through, she excused herself to the bathroom. I watched the screen of her phone light up when she left it behind. No name. Just a message. "Can't wait for Friday. Miss you already." I didn't touch it. Not yet. When she came back, she smiled at me too wide, too bright, and snuggled close, her body stiff as a corpse. I wrapped my arm around her anyway, because I had a role to play too. The days leading up to Friday crawled by like dying animals. She floated through the house, chirping about errands, PTA meetings, parent-teacher conferences, none of which I could verify without looking like the paranoid husband she now treated me like behind closed doors. She wore new makeup, new perfume, tight clothes, all under the guise of feeling good about herself. Maybe once, I would have believed that, but not now. Now, every extra swipe of lipstick, every spray of perfume, every last-minute meeting was just another dagger twisting deeper into my gut. I stayed quiet, watched, waited. Thursday night, we fought. It started small, like these things always do. She accused me of being distant, of being cold, of pulling away from her and making her feel unwanted. I sat there, listening to her spin the web tighter around herself, painting herself as the victim in a war she had started without me. Finally, I said, "Maybe if you spent more time here instead of running errands, you wouldn't feel that way." Her eyes flashed. "Are you accusing me of something?" she snapped. I shrugged. Should I be? For a second, just a second, panic flickered across her face. She hid it quickly, masking it with anger. "You know what?" she said, grabbing her purse off the counter. "I'm not doing this. I'm going for a drive." I watched her walk out the door without another word. The tires squealed against the pavement as she tore out of the driveway. I sat there alone, the cold from the kitchen tile seeping into my bones. I didn't follow her. Not yet. I just sat there, thinking about the lies, the changed passwords, the perfume, the secret smiles, the strange groceries, the bruises she couldn't explain, and thinking about the man I used to be before this, the man who trusted, the man who believed, He was dead now. Murdered quietly over months, left rotting under the surface while I smiled and nodded and kept pretending. I tucked the boys into bed without her. Sat alone on the porch until I saw her headlights sweeping back up the driveway. She came inside without a word, without an apology, slipping past me like a ghost into the bedroom. I stayed where I was, staring at the empty driveway, feeling the rage inside me go cold and hard. Friday morning, she woke up early, bright and energetic, buzzing around the kitchen like a woman in love. Not with me. She packed a small overnight bag, something she tried to hide under her coat when she thought I wasn't looking. Work conference, she chirped when I asked where she was headed. Last-minute thing. Should be back tomorrow evening. I smiled. Nodded. Have fun, I said. She kissed the boys goodbye like she might never see them again. Kissed me last, a quick peck on the cheek, not even looking me in the eyes. Then she was gone. I waited 10 minutes. Packed the boys into the car. Started driving. We took the long way home, past the gas station where she sometimes met her friends, past the strip of hotels near the highway. I drove slow, every nerve in my body tuned to a razor's edge. And when I saw her car parked outside one of those dingy little motels, the final thread snapped inside me. The next few days dragged by in a slow-motion freefall. She floated through the house with forced smiles and stiff hugs, pretending everything was normal while I tried not to drown in the weight pressing down on my chest. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was staring at a stranger who had stolen my wife's face and voice but none of her heart. She was on her phone constantly now, texting, checking notifications, laughing at things she didn't share with me anymore. If I asked who it was, she brushed it off, just work, or just the group chat. Always casual, always too quick. She never left her phone unattended now. It was glued to her hand, or tucked deep into her pocket if she had to step away. I started noticing little things too. New clothes tucked into the back of the closet. Tags still on. Receipts for places we had never been together. Her hair smelling different, like expensive shampoo she'd never bought before. At dinner, she barely picked at her food, too distracted with whatever was happening inside that glowing rectangle in her hand. The boys tried to pull her into their stories, talking about soccer games, art projects, playground fights, but she just smiled and nodded, her eyes far away. I cleaned up the plates alone while she slipped away upstairs, claiming she was tired. When I followed 10 minutes later, she was already curled under the blankets, phone clutched tight in her hand even as she slept. I stood there in the dark for a long time, listening to her shallow breathing, feeling like I was already mourning something that hadn't died yet. Saturday morning, she was up early. Too early. Banging around the kitchen, pulling things out of the fridge, muttering to herself. When I came downstairs, she greeted me with a blindingly bright smile. I was thinking, she chirped, you should take the boys out for the day. Maybe go hiking? You guys haven't had a guy's day in forever. I blinked at her. We hadn't even talked about plans for the weekend. Normally, she hated when we went hiking without her. You're not coming? I asked. She shook her head, already tying her sneakers, already moving too fast. I need to catch up on stuff here. Laundry, cleaning, maybe just have a little me time. You know how it is. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her the kids missed her, that I missed her, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and started packing water bottles and snacks like the good little husband she needed me to be. As I loaded the boys into the car, she stood in the driveway waving at us, her smile strained, her body tense like she couldn't wait for us to disappear. I caught a flash of movement behind the front window, a shadow pulling back from the curtain. I stared at it for a second too long, trying to make sense of it, before she leaned into the car window and kissed me quickly on the cheek. Have fun, she said, her breath shaky against my skin. Then she stepped back, waving again as I pulled out of the driveway, the boys shouting and laughing in the back seat. The drive to the trailhead was longer than I remembered. Every mile, my mind spun darker and darker stories. Maybe she just needed time alone. Maybe she was planning a surprise for us. Maybe she really was overwhelmed and just trying to cope in her own way. Maybe. But the unease gnawed at me all the same. When we got to the park, the boys sprinted ahead, racing each other to the trail markers while I trudged behind, weighed down by a dread I couldn't shake. We hiked for hours. The kids climbed rocks and splashed in the creek and begged for snacks and shouted for me to watch every time they did something even slightly dangerous. I smiled and cheered and took pictures. Pretended like everything was fine. Pretended I wasn't checking my phone every few minutes, even though I knew she wouldn't text. She didn't. When the boys finally started to tire out, We sat on a big flat rock overlooking the valley and ate peanut butter sandwiches. The sun was warm. The sky was impossibly blue. It should have been a perfect day. Instead, it felt like sitting on the edge of something rotten, pretending not to smell the decay. Around 3 o'clock, one of the boys asked when we were going home. I hesitated. Normally, I would have stretched the day out, gone for ice cream, found a second trail, stopped at the old diner on the way home. Anything to give her more space, more time. But something in me, something old and hard and stubborn, said no. We'll head back now, I said, ruffling his hair. Mom probably misses you guys. They cheered, tired but happy, and we packed up our things. The drive home was quiet. The boys dozed off in the back seat, worn out from fresh air and running wild. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and tighter the closer we got to home. The neighborhood slid by outside the windows, same neat lawns, same waving neighbors, same cracked sidewalks. But everything felt different now, like the world had tilted just a few degrees off-center, and no one else noticed. As I turned onto our street, I caught a glimpse of our house between the trees. The blinds in the living room were drawn tight, even though she loved letting the sun in on days like this. The front door was closed. The porch was empty. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The boys stirred awake as I parked the car. I forced a smile, unbuckled my seatbelt, and climbed out. My hand hesitated on the door handle for just a second too long. Then I opened the door and stepped inside. The second I pushed the bedroom door open, the world tipped sideways. She was there, tangled up in the sheets with another man, her back arching, her mouth open in a silent gasp she never made for me. Their bodies twisted together in a desperate, disgusting rhythm, so lost in each other they didn't hear me standing there. I dropped the boys' backpacks at my feet. The thud was loud enough. They froze. She twisted to look over her shoulder, her face crumpling in an instant, horror spreading across her features like wildfire. The man scrambled back, yanking the sheet up to cover himself, fumbling like a kid caught sneaking out after curfew. I didn't blink. I didn't move. She opened her mouth, some excuse already spilling out, but I cut her off with a look so cold it could have frozen fire. I turned on my heel without a word, walked back down the stairs in a slow, measured way, each step hammering the betrayal deeper into my chest. The boys were still on the couch, arguing about cartoons. I told them to grab their jackets. I told them we were leaving. I kept my voice calm. Behind me, I heard her stumbling down the stairs after me, shouting my name, begging me to stop. I didn't even glance back. She caught my arm at the door, her nails digging in. "Please, just let me explain," she sobbed, her mascara running down her cheeks in thick, ugly streaks. I peeled her fingers off my sleeve one by one. "Explain?" I said quietly. "You looked pretty clear without words upstairs." The boys stared at us, confused, scared. I shoved the door open and herded them outside, shielding them with my body like I could protect them from the sight of what their mother had become. She followed us onto the porch, barefoot and crying, begging, pleading, making promises she had no right to make. I loaded the kids into the car, buckled their seat belts with steady, mechanical hands, kissed the tops of their heads like it might be the last time. She tried to wedge herself between me and the driver's door, clutching my jacket, sobbing into my chest. I pushed her back, not hard, but firm. She stumbled, catching herself against the railing, looking up at me with wild, panicked eyes. "You made your choice," I said, my voice low, steady, colder than I'd ever heard it sound. "Live with it." I climbed into the car, locked the doors, started the engine. She pounded on the window with the flat of her hand, screaming something I didn't bother trying to hear. I reversed down the driveway slow, not tearing away like some movie scene, but measured, deliberate. I made her watch every second of it. I drove straight to my brother's house. He didn't ask questions when I showed up on his doorstep with the boys and a look in my eyes that must have said everything. He pulled us inside, handed me a beer without a word, and gave the kids the remote control. That night, I sat on the back porch staring into the dark, feeling the weight of it all settle into my bones. The messages started almost immediately. First her, then her mother, then mutual friends, one after another. Apologies, excuses, lies stacked on lies. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. The next morning, I called a lawyer, filed for full custody before noon, took the evidence, the phone logs, the security cam footage from the doorbell, The testimonies from neighbors who had seen strange cars parked outside on weekends when I was supposed to be out with the boys. I built a case brick by brick, not out of hate, but out of cold, mechanical necessity. She tried to fight it, of course. Tried to paint me as the villain. Tried to cry in court, to throw herself on the mercy of strangers. But you can't unring a bell. You can't unsleep with a stranger while your children's toys sit untouched in the next room. When the judge handed down the verdict, full custody, supervised visitation only, I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. I just nodded. Walked out of that courtroom with my boys at my side and my soul lighter than it had been in years. The life I had was over. But the life ahead of me? That was mine alone now. She stood on the courthouse steps watching us leave, a broken silhouette framed against the harsh afternoon sun. She made her choice. I made mine. And I never looked back. Subscribe to hear more stories.